The rise of low-wage manufacturing has fundamentally changed the nature of international competition. Firms in Western economies with higher wages and costs have struggled to remain competitive. This film explores how firms in two of Europe's largest economies, Italy and Germany, are facing up to competition from low-cost international producers. Should they force down their own costs, or are there other ways they can compete? Historically, the two countries have taken very different routes towards improving industrial competitiveness. The German success story in exporting manufactured goods is well documented, but less well known is Italy's track record.
Italy is among the top exporters in the world. We are the second largest manufacturing country in Europe. After Germany, there is Italy, as the largest manufacturing sector in Europe.
Before the introduction of the euro in 1999, the Italians relied on manipulating their currency.
Up to the 90s, the Italian economy could gain competitiveness through the devaluation of the Italian lira, the currency. That gave competitiveness gain to the Italian industry.
After Italy joined the euro, devaluation was no longer an option, and structural economic changes were vital to improve competitiveness and economic growth.
The real problem is growth. We have a very bad performance in terms of GDP growth. Most of the problems are micro: labor market, firm size, education. If the justice sector is very inefficient, if the state sector is very inefficient, if transportation are not very efficient, the easiness or the difficulty to make business, enforcing contracts, getting credit, they are very difficult to solve in Italy compared to other advanced economies. Most of the problems, the urgent problems, are microeconomic today.
Productivity has been stagnating for over 20 years now, whereas in other countries it has been growing at higher rates. There has been very little investment, especially in training, R&D, not necessarily stellar, high-sky R&D, but day-to-day operations. I remember 20 years ago when some friend of mine and I were complaining, saying, listen, we are spending too little in this kind of investment, we are going to suffer. Here we are.
Italy has not actually made the kind of investments that countries like Germany have been making in human capital, in research and development, in different variables that increase productivity. Fiat has not been investing in new engines at the same level that Volkswagen has.
Low productivity has meant Italian companies have struggled with competition from countries with lower labour costs. In textiles, Italy is a significant exporter. But over the last 20 years, cheap clothes and fabrics from Asia have had a big impact on sales.
In the 90s and the first years in 2000, this was the most terrific time. 2005 is actually the turning point where most of the companies which were not prepared in order to compete very fiercely and strongly towards the rival, they started to fail.
Italian companies across all sectors tend to be smaller than their competitors, making them more vulnerable. 95% have fewer than 10 workers.
If we take the typical size of furniture company in Italy, it's about 6 employees. If we take the average size of German firms in furniture, it's 60 employees. So it's 1 to 10 in comparison. And this, I think, is important in many respects, especially when it comes to face the global competition.
Small firm size makes it difficult to invest in new technology and exploit economies of scale. The companies that have proved most resilient have controlled costs and been the most innovative. Biella, an historic textile district in northern Italy. Giovanni Germanetti is a family owner of a medium-sized woolen and cashmere business that has survived.
In Biella, many companies have closed down in the past years. Most of the competition came from Eastern Europe and China, because in those countries the labor force is much cheaper than in Italy. The people who are doing higher stuff has stayed in the market. The people who are doing very lower stuff, they have been taken over from China.
And in Prato, a famous Tuscan textile district, the changes were even more dramatic. When Italian businesses went bust, Chinese entrepreneurs took over the factory space with Chinese workers on lower wages than the surviving Italian companies. The Chinese were keen to exploit the Made in Italy label. Initially, they supplied Italian businesses with cheaper fabrics and clothes. But once established, they began to directly compete with the Italians at the low end of the market.
Quando poi i cinesi si sono messi in proprio a svolgere il lavoro di commercializzazione dei capi finiti e non servire più le aziende italiane, è evidente che queste sono entrate in crisi perché il peso della competizione ha ammazzato quello che erano le aziende di pronto moda del territorio pratese.
Although Italian clothing firms at the low end have been wiped out, there's still a strong global market for Italian high-end textiles. But there's also a heightened awareness that even these businesses cannot afford to be complacent.
L'Italia è rimasta a presidiare soltanto la fascia del lusso delle lane fini. Per uscire da questa crisi è di implementare l'innovazione e la ricerca di prodotto contemporaneamente a una presenza più forte della rete di imprese che sono tutte medio-piccole, più piccole che medie, sui mercati internazionali.
In Germany, like Italy, family firms form the backbone of the economy. The so-called Mittelstand of small and medium-sized companies employ over 60% of the labour force. But unlike Italy, there's a strong history of high investment.
We have quite a few medium-sized companies which are very successful. Often they are world champion in a specific niche. In Germany, the companies normally they stick to their main product line, or improve it, of course, and leave the money there. And I think this reinvestment by the owners is helping them to be successful.
One of Germany's most successful companies is Miele. Set up in 1899 to make high-quality butter churns, it's evolved into a premium white goods manufacturer, selling high-end washing machines and household appliances around the world.
We have a higher quality, we test the appliances to last 20 years, and this means we have to charge a higher price for that. We have just one brand, and this is different to most of the competitors in the white goods industry. They have a lot of brands.
Sie sehen, an dieser Stelle befinden wir uns im Funktionstest der Montagelinie. Die Geräte sind komplett montiert. Und um dem Kunden ein voll funktionsfähiges Gerät zur Verfügung zu stellen, werden hier alle Funktionen, ähnlich wie der Kunde sie auch im Betrieb, nochmal überprüft.
We charge a higher price, but we have the quality and we have the features inside. And this strategy has served us well for more than 100 years.
Like many Mittelstand companies, Miele invest in high levels of R&D. To keep up quality levels, but also to create new and improved products.
Innovations are very, very important in the white goods industry, like our honeycomb drum, for example, in the washer. So you have to add something in order that the consumer says, wow, this is really a great machine. So we have to constantly innovate, and we spend between 5 to 7% of the whole turnover on research and development, which is quite a lot. So you have to invest. Sometimes features or products do better than others. We also have products which are not successful, of course. We also stop products where we said we don't make much money on them.
Despite charging high prices to cover their investments, Miele are conscious about costs and maximising profits.
We have to really look into every detail and see how can we optimize costs. Sometimes we have to automate, sometimes we have to find different solutions, but in the end you have to also look at profitability. So what's the most profitable point for your company in the market? Economies of scale are important, but sometimes they stop for the premium positioning, for example. And then you go into the mass market, which others can do much better than we do. So you have to observe what is the right point for your company concerning sales quantities and so on.
The German economy is currently flourishing, but 10 years ago, in the early 2000s, growth was stagnant with high unemployment. This led the Schroeder government to introduce labour market reforms, including cuts to unemployment benefit.
This put pressure on employees to take up jobs which are less well paid than they used to be. Also, the temporary work became a very important element, and this gave lots of flexibility to companies like, if you take companies like BMW or others, they employ almost 1/3 of their staff with the help of such agencies.
Seitdem haben wir nahezu ein Jobwunder erlebt. Wir haben heute mit über 40 Millionen Erwerbstätigen so viel Erwerbstätige wie noch nie in Deutschland. Es war die Grundlage dessen, dass wir unsere Wettbewerbsfähigkeit ein Stück zurückgewonnen haben über Flexibilität, obwohl wir nach wie vor mit die höchsten Löhne auf der Welt haben.
But just how important were the Schroeder reforms for improving German competitiveness?
Alone, that would have never, in and of itself, allowed Germany to produce the kind of goods that the world wants to buy. I think it's really in combination with the investments that Germany was making in R&D, in human capital, and its varied institutional structure, that those Schroeder reforms had an effect. Instead, what we're hearing today is that if the weaker Eurozone countries want to grow and to be like Germany, then they should hold down wages, as if that was, the only source of its success. That is a very ideological interpretation of the German miracle.
Back in Italy, many of the textile companies that have survived have adopted an approach with similarities to that of the German Mittelstand by targeting the high end of the market.
Perché abbiamo capito 5-6 anni fa che è impossibile lottare, fare concorrenza alla Cina, all'est europeo, ad altri paesi. Noi abbiamo scelto un'altra via, quella di fare delle cose molto speciali, molto particolari, che si distinguessero dalla produzione di questi mercati. Questa è stata la nostra ricetta, infatti negli ultimi anni il nostro prezzo medio di vendita dei tessuti è aumentato di circa il 30%.
Lenzi e Gisto used to specialise in shoes, but after being undercut by the Chinese in the 1990s, they shifted to collaborating with American company DuPont on new textile innovations.
DuPont was producing very nice fibers, very nice yarns, and they had a gap between the yarn and the end user. And we were the link between those 2 points. So we became a sort of operating lab, receiving the special fiber, making the fabric. Thanks to this operation, we went in touch with some of the major brand names, offering very high tech materials, but with a very fashion look.
Over the last 10 years, Lenzi have developed a series of innovative textile-based products, including bulletproof clothing, protective footwear, and specialised fabrics for the health and fashion sectors. More and more companies are also opting for vertical integration, where all stages of production are kept in-house as much as possible to ensure consistency and top quality.
È una decisione che abbiamo preso in virtù di quello che ci chiedeva il mercato. Il mercato ci chiede sempre di più delle soluzioni complete e quindi abbiamo più possibilità di vendere o i tessuti o i capi o tutto insieme. Noi lavoriamo con clienti di alta fascia italiani, Prada, Gucci, Ferragamo. Sono tutti clienti che comprano da noi, però poi producono capi che esportano a tutto il mondo.
With a very important process of selection of companies. The good firms have survived and probably the bad or so-and-so firms have now disappeared. So from this point of view, this could even be a good sign for the future.
Another growing trend in both German and Italian manufacturing is to take a much more global perspective on production and on sales.
In 1994, we still had a share of 50% in Germany and 50% abroad. Now last year it was 30% Germany and 70% abroad, although we were growing in Germany. This means if you think about development, for example, that people have to think much more about the needs of the consumers outside Germany. With 47 countries where we sell in, we have to make sure that the products we produce have the right features for the right consumers in those countries. So it's not only Far East, it's not only Italy, it's not Germany anymore, it's a worldwide competition.
Part of meeting that competition has been to offshore some of the labour-intensive aspects of the production process to save costs. But this can threaten the quality control of companies that are used to high levels of vertical integration.
We have factories also abroad where we manufacture parts and sometimes also whole appliances for Miele, but always the same quality level. So the most difficult decision is to find the right persons to run that factory because they have to understand how we think about quality, what we want the product to look like, and if they can really get our spirit. Once they got it, then it's not a problem, and you can run a factory in almost any country.
Questa qui è tutta lana, pura lana?
No, ci sono
lana
anche delle viste
rigenerata?
particolari. No, ci sono...
And even in Italian textiles, where the Made in Italy label is crucial, there's a growing trend to offshore at least the early stages of production.
We have invested 15 years ago in Poland, and we have a spinning mill over there where we produce part of our yarn that is used in our weaving facility. When we started 15 years ago, it wasn't easy, and they didn't have that know-how that we had in Biella. But things were going so expensive for the labor force in Italy that we were obliged to move to Poland. And so now, after a long time of training our employees, we can say that we achieve the same level of quality as we do in Italy. But if the production, the weaving and the finishing is done in Italy, it's made in Italy.
And some Italian textile companies have taken a step further by developing international partnerships.
This is an important strategy for the competitiveness of Italian firms. Probably it's less widespread than one can imagine, and this is due to the small size of Italian companies. But the successful companies which have been able to scale up and to outsource. And this is, of course, very important in terms of reducing cost.
We have found a very profitable cooperation with the Chinese. So Chinese are not always an enemy, but they can be an opportunity because for Lenzi, China is a good customer, it's a good partner. They want a local service, they want a logistic to buy directly from China. Doesn't matter if it is made in Italy or somewhere else. The problem for them is to buy China on China.
But although many companies have made those international partnerships work, they're not always successful.
The skills are not something you can just train people on for a year or a few months and then expect them to work like workers who have been doing this for years or even for generations in Germany. For example, there's a big manufacturer of bearings for industry needs and for automotive. And he pushed production a few years ago to Romania, and he sent German people to train the workers there on the job, and it just didn't work out. They lost millions of euros, and then finally they decided to get the production back here because it just didn't work the way it was supposed to.
Another danger is that international partnerships seem to speed up the process of catch-up with Italy and Germany, even at the high end of production.
We did a study some years ago to what extent China could be a competitor for German high-tech industry. Well, at that stage, we thought it will take at least 10-15 years before they catch up. But nowadays we have to face the problem that in some areas the Chinese are catching up faster than expected. This makes it necessary that we push ahead in the field of innovation in order not to lose the technological leadership.
This film has shown that despite their very different economic contexts, there are some striking similarities in the way the strongest Italian and German firms compete on the global market.
We noticed that those companies that are much more performing compared to others, they have the same kind of patterns. So first of all, they innovate in the product. These companies are companies that continuously introduce new kind of products. The second thing is process innovation. So they continued to renew their production process and also to renew machineries and to renew the technology. The third thing is that they reposition themselves on a higher part of the market. So they differentiate their brand, style, design. But on the other side, they didn't lose the control of costs. So it's a combination of two different strategies, the differentiation on one side, but the strict control of cost on the other side.